Hey, I'm Scott Kirsner, and welcome to What Matters in Innovation. We're going to share a couple innovation related news stories and news items that you may have missed, talk a little bit about what they mean. Joining me is Alex Slawsby from Derisk and Robyn Bolton from MileZero. Robyn, you brought a Fast Company story about design thinking with you this week. Tell us a little bit about why they think a particular design thinking strategy is BS.
Sure. So what caught my attention was basically BS in the title and calling "How might we" that famous kind of ideation prompt BS. And so the author's issue with it is that when you say "How might we," the "we" is referring to the people in the room, and the people in the room are often different than the customers or the people with the problem. And, I can say I have experienced this firsthand years ago when I was working on Swiffer and Swiffer WetJet. I was the only woman on a team, and we actually had a meeting about how might we have a Valentine's Day promo for Swiffer WetJet and encourage men to buy WetJet for their wives because they're worth it. And, I was able to intervene by telling my boss to call his wife and ask her opinion. And when he did, and she said, "Pick up the phone," and you could hear her yelling at him over it, that squashed the idea. But I thought it was interesting that, this critical part of how might we could actually derail innovation.
Yeah, and look, a key component to it is, there can be value in taking a totally outside sort of fresh look at things. But then if you get too far away from the actual customer and their reality, right, then you can come up with something that's totally disconnected. So I think it emphasizes the importance of getting quickly back and that new thing you come up with, like being real close and does it actually work? Will it even matter? So it's, I think, a real endorsement of, take an outside view, but then as quickly as you can, get real close to that customer and make sure you're sanity checking whether you're even remotely on the right path.
Yeah, even if it's one phone call to your wife to get yelled at.
Well, it also seems like it raises the responsibility that if you don't have the most diverse group of people in the room ideating and asking how might we, that when you start your customer research, you want to make sure that that's a nice, broad, diverse group of customers that you're talking to.
Yeah, and that you anchor the rest of that sentence in the customer insight versus in the solution itself. So yeah, always keeping the customer at the center.
So my item this week actually ties into customer research and what happens at the end of the journey when you've released a product and the customer has to decide, do they want to buy it or not. I've been testing out a robot that came out of this corporate innovation lab here in Boston called Piaggio Fast Forward. The parent company is over in Italy, Piaggio Group, which makes the Vespa scooter and a bunch of other gasoline powered vehicles. This Gita robot I've been testing is battery powered. And I think the how might we that they started with was how might we come up with a device, mobility device that helps city dwellers carry stuff around if they're doing errands on foot without a car. The Gita robot is probably the most attention getting thing I've ever tested out in public. You can't walk around with a robot trailing you with no visible connection without having people stop and ask you what it is. The challenge with the Gita robot is that it weighs 50 pounds. And so the question you have to ask as a consumer using this robot is it worth carrying something down the steps that weighs 50 pounds at the beginning of the errand and carrying it back up the steps? And it's hard for me to imagine that they developed this thing and didn't do that consumer testing of what if you live in a building that doesn't have a perfectly flat entrance or a ramp and elevators? I mean, I don't know about you, Alex, but not a lot of people I know live in a condo or live in a home that doesn't have at least one or two steps to get up to the front door.
Yeah, so that's one issue. And then you've got the social acceptability. There may be people out there that like the statement it makes. Look at me, I'm on the cutting edge. Look how cool I am, all futuristic. But there's probably a lot of people that maybe don't want to see those stairs, not just the ones you climb, but the look, right, from others. So function, but ultimately what it says about people, I'm not sure a lot of people are going to jump on it right away.
Well, and you got to think about, storage space, right? A 50-pound robot can't be the tiniest thing in the world. And I've lived in some tiny apartments in Boston on the third floor. I barely have room for me, let alone a robot. But, maybe the how might we question they started with was how might we help city dwellers run errands and get a workout at the same time?
I love it.
And then maybe none of them were actually city dwellers, right? Which gets to the crux of the problem. For my item, I wanted to talk briefly about Jeff Bezos stepping down this year after 27 years as Amazon CEO to become executive chairman. And Andy Jassy, who came up with the idea for Amazon Web Services and who's led it since 2006, will take over as CEO. Now, obviously, Bezos' impact, Amazon's impact on our lives is undeniable. He grew the company from $500,000 in revenue in its first year to, I think it was like 380 billion or more last year. Amazon employs over 1.3 million people, 200 million Prime members worldwide. I mean, obviously, just huge. Amazon's facing a bunch of headwinds now. So there are all kinds of antitrust efforts in Congress trying to force Amazon and some of the other leading digital companies to change their practices. There's some big labor condition challenges in warehouses and for delivery drivers, so push towards unionization. And there's some concerns about gender diversity in the senior leadership team. I think nearly 80% of Amazon's senior leaders are men. And so it's now Jassy who's going to face these challenges. Bezos, among a lot of his leadership lessons, always emphasized that integrity, consistency, and follow-through are really crucial to leadership. So I think it's interesting. Certainly there's the question, can Amazon continue to be as innovative as it was under Bezos, now under Jassy? But will we reach a moment where Jassy's espoused a policy or a certain direction for Amazon, and then it becomes clear that Bezos is sort of working the strings in the back and sends Amazon in a direction that's misaligned with what Jassy has suggested? Does that put Jassy in a difficult position? Does it challenge his integrity and his ability to project a very strong leadership image? So I think that's an interesting challenge we're going to need to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and Alex, you're spot on with this in terms of just the transition from the founder to that next CEO who's not the founder is such a critical and fraught moment in a company's history. And so many things can go wrong with so many things can go right. In terms of Amazon continuing its innovation, I mean, Jassy created Amazon Web Services. That was, a side project. That was just something kind of off on the periphery that's become a huge part of the company. So I'm optimistic, given Jassy's background. He seems like a true entrepreneur, that the innovation can continue. But I think it's also a big question that even though he's earned a lot of respect and he has a great track record, the question you bring up of, is he going to get the freedom to run is a good one.
I also kind of feel I'm a little bit of a skeptic on this. And I feel like unless a CEO has died or taken on another CEO job, and left that active executive chairman or CEO role, they're just looming so large, not just as the founder, but as an executive chairman that, if the company hits a couple potholes, if there is an active antitrust case, like Alex mentioned, does Bezos need to kind of swoop back in and take over again? We saw it happen at Disney last year, in the early days of the pandemic, where Bob Iger said, I'm going to take a more active role in leading the company through this. We saw it with Starbucks a few years ago when Howard Schultz, the founder, came back in. And so I just always think there's that haziness with employees and middle management and senior leaders of, given that the founder's still hanging around and, we still see him in the offices and he's still an executive chairman, who are we really listening to? Who is calling the shots? It's definitely going to be an interesting couple of years, I think, to watch, Amazon's continued growth and their trajectory going forward. This has been really super interesting 3 items. I want to say thanks to Robyn Bolton from MileZero, Alex Slawsby from Derisk, and thanks to you for watching What Matters in Innovation. We'll be back with another episode real soon. And one last note, we have 2 really great webcasts at Innovation Leader. They're coming up in July and August. The first one led by IDEO, the next one in August led by Hype Innovation. You can find out how to register for free for those at innovationleader.com. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.